competition in the restaurant business is fierce, but the camaraderie is fiercer. We have so much respect for each other. If there's a culinary question that needs to be answered, you can get it answered from somebody in the business. If I want to know something, from somebody who I really respect, the answer is always yes. It's never like, I'm not telling you my secrets.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. What a fun conversation with the one and only Bobby Flay. Bobby joins us in the studio to talk about his New York City restaurant career, including highly memorable restaurants Mesa Grill, Bolo, Gato, and Bar Americain. We dig into how Mesa Grill was such a groundbreaking idea in the early 1990s, and how his cooking there brought Southwest flavors into the mainstream. We also talk about how beating Bobby Flay actually means beating Bobby Flay, and talk about some classic Iron Chef episodes. Finally, we dig into his great new cookbook, Bobby Flay, Chapter 1. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Bobby Flay, welcome. This is Taste. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm excited to talk about this book. I mean, first off, I have to ask, where have you been dining out in New York? You're here, you're working, you're doing television.
I live here.
You live here. You grew up here.
I did. Yeah. I live in Tribeca, but I grew up on the Upper East Side. At the time, it was called Yorkville.
Yeah, I remember.
It was actually a very, very cool area. There was a lot of Eastern European people that lived there, a lot of Czechoslovakian influence, a lot of Hungarian people, and there was like amazing spice shops, like Hungarian spices and stuff like this. Is like in the 60s and 70s. So yeah, it was known as Yorkville then.
Yeah, so are you eating in German restaurants as well up there?
There were tons of German restaurants.
That's the thing about that neighborhood.
Yeah, on 86th Street, there was a ton of German restaurants. And then Schaller Weber, has been there forever. It's like a German butcher shop. It's, lots of influence.
There was like a hint that they were going to go out of business at one point, but I'm glad they kept it going.
They did not, yeah.
I have to ask too, growing up in New York, downtown, you're going to school, are you eating slices often? Are you like a slice guy at that point in your life?
Totally. I grew up in New York. I mean, it's the a slice of pizza in New York City is basically, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah. I mean, so the book is really terrific in that it's called Chapter 1, and it doesn't talk about a lot of your television career and all the things we know you for. It talks about your life growing up, and we're going to talk about many things here. Sweet remembrance of your mother, in Atlantic City, and there's just some really great memoir there. What's the restaurant culture like in your family growing up? Are you going out to restaurants?
Yeah, from time to time. My grandfather would take us out. New York City, there was a very big culture of people going to Chinese restaurants on Sunday nights. Like high-end Chinese restaurants. There's only a couple that exist these days. I think like Chun-Li Palace is still around. But like for the most part, there was like a handful of really great high-end Chinese restaurants that my grandfather, Willie, would assemble the family on Sunday nights. And we would go to these Chinese restaurants that served all these, I guess, I don't know if they were actually real Chinese cuisine. It's probably an Americanized version of Chinese cuisine. But it was... But that's how we grew up.
Did you ever interact with Ed Schoenfeld, Eddie Glasses?
Of course. Absolutely. I knew Ed for a long time.
I know, me too. And
Ed was like, this Jewish New Yorker who was like the Chinese food ambassador.
Crazy, right? Yeah.
Until he passed away.
I know. Rest in peace, Ed Schoenfeld, Eddie Glasses. What a character. And, he really did a lot to bring Chinese food, of course, working with many Chinese chefs.
He worked with David Kay. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. David Kay, I know that name. I don't think I had David Kay's food. Tell me about it.
David Kay was a restaurant owner. He had a place called David Kay's and a couple other restaurants in New York. He was a tough guy. Like, I think there was lots of Mahjong games, in the basement kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, but Ed, worked with him, and he worked with a lot of different people, and that was the sort of era of like high-end Chinese restaurants in New York. And then what happened was, like, we sort of saw like a growing number of places that had the word wok in it, like wok number 1, wok number 2, and they were like more casual, more affordable, a lot of to go. and it really created this culture of Chinese food to go, and it kind of, in some ways, killed the high-end Chinese restaurant business, which I really miss. I yearn for those.
Yeah, it's a great point and astute observation. The point at the menu Chinese of the 70s, started obviously in San Francisco, but New York had such a scene. And it's interesting how, like in pop culture, I think New York had so many restaurants that we just became accustomed to those types of restaurants, and it grew around the country.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we obviously we still have a pretty sizable Chinatown here as well. But there was Chinese restaurants all over New York City. It wasn't just in Chinatown.
Yeah, no, it's why the city is so unique with so many of those. You write about your restaurants in the book, and the recipes are informed by many of your established restaurants. I love the lines about Mesa Grill, opened in 1991. But I want to go back to a trip you took to the Southwest before that restaurant opened that really informed your interest and really piqued an interest in that cuisine. Tell us about that trip that informed this.
I took a trip to the Southwest, the American Southwest, because I was really interested in contemporary Southwestern cuisine, and this cuisine was basically being invented in some ways in the Southwest of the United States.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, lots of influence from Mexico, but lots of influence from like the states that border, from the southern borders, like from California to New Mexico, like Arizona, Texas, all those states that had a lot of influence from Mexico, obviously including the ingredients. But this cuisine was a slightly different version of Mexican cuisine. It wasn't quite Mexican cuisine, although it was obviously very much based in Mexico. It was a different approach, and a lot of the ingredients were truly American because they were coming out of these American states, And, I fell in love with it because I was working for Jonathan Waxman. And he had a restaurant called Bud's, which was his second restaurant after Jam's. I worked in all three of his restaurants.
What a great namer of restaurants, that man.
Bud's was he and his partner, Melvin Masters.
Yeah.
They called each other Bud, so they named the restaurant Bud's.
And then Jam's, of course.
Well, Jam's was Jonathan and Melvin's.
Yeah.
And then Hulot's was named after like a French character. From a movie. And I worked in that restaurant as well. I worked in all of his restaurants. This is way before Barbuto, which we all know and love.
Still around, yeah.
Oh, it's flourishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. So I went to the Southwest. A woman named Karen McNeil took me. She at the time was a very prolific journalist for food magazines, like Bon App and Food and Wine and all those things. And she was like, I'm going to visit the Southwest. I'm going to go visit Robert Del Grande, Stephen Piles, Kevin Rathbun, who was working for Stephen Piles, but about to go out on his own as well. These guys, like, they took me into their restaurants. And they showed me what was up. Mark Miller was part of that.
Mark
wave,
Miller,
of course.
Mark Miller, yeah.
New Mexico, like, knew
That's
everything about every chili pepper ever grown anywhere in the world. Guy was just like an anthropologist of chili peppers. And I went on this trip, and you have to remember, I'm like 21 or 22 years old. I'm like this bratty kid from New York City, and I want to cook this food. This is the thing I try to explain to people all the time. The restaurant business is the greatest business in the world. Okay? I am a absolute lover of the business. I don't want to talk about any more bad stories because there's so many great stories. And I think, like, they let me into their kitchens and taught this kid from New York they did not know, okay? Let me into their kitchens, showed me what they were doing, how they were utilizing all these ingredients, and like it helped shape my career. What other industry does that?
Yeah.
None.
Yeah, you have to sign like NDAs to get into a meeting in most industries.
I always say, like, the competition in the restaurant business is fierce, but the camaraderie is fiercer.
Yeah.
We have so much respect for each other. We give and take. We trade employees. If they want to go and try something different. If there's a culinary question that needs to be answered, you can get it answered from somebody in the business. Of course, you can look it up on Google, but you want to go to the source. Like if I want to know something, from somebody who I really respect, whether it's like Wolfgang Puck or Daniel Boulud or, the guys from the Southwest? The answer is always yes. It's never like, I'm not telling you my secrets. It's a wonderful business.
Yeah, and the recipe books are open too. And if you go to a professional kitchen, you see recipe books open. It's not like some secrets. I think that's like a mythology around restaurant cooking that
of course.
You keep secrets.
No,
It's
there's
cool.
no secrets.
Let me ask you about Southwest cuisine. So you do this trip, and you end up back in New York, and you end up conceiving and opening Mesa Grill in 1991. Did you, Bobby, see an opportunity in New York to bring these flavors? I mean, you saw an opportunity, but you must have really seen an opportunity to excite New Yorkers, jaded New Yorkers, on a new cuisine.
Okay. Couple of things. First of all, I'm a New Yorker, and at that point in my career, the only thing I knew how to do was cook for New Yorkers. And, that's a very separate skill.
Yeah.
Also, to be fair, Arizona 206 was open by a chef named Brendan Walsh, and he was cooking delicious contemporary Southwestern food. I was a lover of his restaurant. And so Mesa Grill was not the first, for sure, but I started cooking at a restaurant called Miracle Grill.
Yeah.
And this is where I picked up all these flavors. And then after 3 years, I opened Mesa Grill.
You write that you leave a crack open to bring back Mesa Grill in 2025 or future years. I'm going to take a sledgehammer to that and just say, like, please. It would seem pretty cool to open this restaurant in 2025.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did you ever go to Mesa Grill?
Of course. I went 3 times, I think, in my mind.
So you remember what it looked like and all that?
I mean, it felt extremely of the era of the 90s. Of course. Yes. It had a very 90s decor.
Yeah.
I mean, now that shit is hot. So, bring it back.
Well, like in your mind, is it the same? Does it have the same feel, or is it something different?
Well, it feels like the way Spice Market felt. And it was a real occasion restaurant, bar Americaine as well. You go there and you get service. I think service is always important.
Energy.
Of course. And we have such small spaces, these narrow spaces in Brooklyn. And I have said on this show many times and spoken to chefs, I would love to see the event restaurant come back. I think Teresi did a great job to bring that energy back to New York. And I think there would be a real opportunity to do a big Bobby Flay event restaurant in New York. And the flavors too. Would you go back to Mesa Grill? Flavors? That style?
Sure.
Dude, I'm bringing this sledgehammer.
2.0.
I know.
A new look at it,
I feel like the flavors too in New York, when we have, Empayón, a credible modern Mexican, that restaurant still crushes. We have so many great taquerias. I think our New Yorker diner is quite fluent in Mexico.
Sure.
But to bring more of the Southwest, you just outlined what Southwest is versus regional Mexican. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking? What's going through your head?
I think about it every single day. Multiple times a day. You have to understand, this is the first time as an adult that I don't have 2 or 3 restaurants in New York City. So when I leave my apartment in the morning, I have no idea where to go. Because I always had my restaurants to go to first and foremost. So I think about it all the time.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you sound like you have some plans, and we'll have you back and talk about the restaurant. I mean, Gato, let's not.
Oh, wait a sec. Hold on. There's nothing happening yet. I promise you.
Okay.
There's no leases. There's no
man.
I mean, it's just a thought. It's
those things, those leases. Those can be worked out pretty quickly.
Oh, really? I guess you haven't signed any leases in New York City with landlords.
Thankfully, I haven't.
Any landlords out there that want to make me a sweetheart deal, give me a call.
I mean, I think when you talk about hospitality and hotel groups, I mean, maybe that's kind of the model these days.
For sure.
And also just residential. And of course, our city is popping up. If you look at the skyline, it's changing. I want to move on because I got to talk about chapter 1. You write very clearly about recipes that are inspired by Iron Chef. And I think it's cool that you bring your record for Iron Chef. You're 43, 16, and 2 in 61 battles. How do you think about your recipes in chapter 1 from that show?
Difficult to make at home. Because in Iron Chef, we always got pushed to the limit because everybody that came in there wanted to hit us over the head with a baseball bat, right? I mean, every chef that came in there wanted to beat one of the Iron Chefs. And I've done, I did more battles than anybody.
61.
By a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was taken to task many, many times. And so you have to completely, up your game. And a lot of times it wasn't like, let's put it this way. We weren't cooking comfort food. We were cooking food that was clever, but also delicious,
Yeah, I think the book is I would say intermediate to advanced and very advanced. We're going to talk about a few dishes, including your fried chicken, which I think is quite a master work.
No, thank you.
Yeah, an absolutely great recipe, and we'll go through it. But Iron Chef, what's the toughest loss you had?
Toughest loss I've had. The toughest loss I had, I guess, was probably against Kevin Rathbun and his brother. I think it was I want to say it was like elk or something, or bison or something along those lines. And they beat me pretty good. Actually, Jose Andres beat me pretty well too.
I'll go back.
Michelle Bernstein.
Oh yeah.
It was onion. I was like, you have to be kidding me. Onion. Those are hard ingredients. Like when somebody gives you lobster or like steak or pork or something, and it's always the center of the menu. But when somebody gives you an onion to make 5 dishes out of, it's not easy.
Yeah,
after blooming onion, what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could only pickle a few times, and of course you could do a roast, but you've only got a few.
But I remember Michelle Bernstein did a great job with her onion dish. She used a lot of caviar. She was smart.
Yeah, you got to go luxury, and you knew how the judges were going. But 43 wins, not bad, man. I commend you. Speaking of Mesa Grill, I emailed your collaborator Emily Timberlake yesterday, and she gave me some great insight. Quote, I was stunned because all the dishes from Mesa Grill, which was top of its game in the 1990s, feel so relevant today. Like, I want to cook all the Mesa Grill dishes today. I think that's a really cool statement about the modernity of that restaurant. How do you feel about Emily's words?
That's really interesting. Well, first of all, I love Emily. She's a fantastic partner and collaborator. So skilled and just so perfect for this project. And I think the thing about Mesa Grill's cuisine is that there wasn't a lot of people doing that food, and nobody actually took it on. Like, I kept waiting for the people who were inspired by it to open their own contemporary Southwestern restaurants, and it didn't really happen. I mean, a little bit here and there. So the food never really got bastardized in any way.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, it lived on its own. They were very original dishes, obviously inspired by lots of things, but very original to Mesa Grill itself. And so in some ways, yes, do they need to be updated? And did I do that for the book? Of course I did, because some of these recipes are 35 years old. Mm-hmm. So yes, of course, it's not like I'm roasting a chicken. I'm making a shrimp and roasted garlic tamale. Like, I needed to update it for today's cooking and whatever, making it lighter, making it brighter, thinking about it slightly different. But those dishes hold up. And so the struggle for me would be, if I open this restaurant, how much do I evolve it? It has to evolve somewhat.
You need a media narrative, of course.
Yes,
that's like
sure.
part of it, right?
Have to evolve it somewhat. Yeah. But in some cases, I have good foundations for a lot of them.
Yeah, I think it seems like the only thing dated in that restaurant when it closed was probably the decor, because it feels like it was very...
Let me tell you something about the decor. We spent literally $280,000 to open that restaurant. $280,000. The door to every restaurant costs that now.
I know.
I mean, seriously.
No.
It was actually a great study in trying to open a restaurant on a shoestring budget that was relevant.
Yeah, I think my example was only saying that, it still felt very fresh. But the bootstrapping restaurants makes really like heartful, soulful restaurants. One of your fried chicken recipes, which you give a little bit of an origin story from Iron Chef, is a process, and I love it. Buttermilk marinade, charred lime, a seasoned flour. You bake before frying, which I'd like to hear a little bit more about.
This is my fried chicken trick.
I love this trick. It stuck out to me. Talk about this process. I can't wait to make this recipe.
One of the things that I do, especially for home cooks and for the restaurants as well, is I take things that are really difficult to execute, like perfectly, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. And I try to simplify them, even though some people might consider it sort of like cheating the technique. Like, who cares? So, for instance, like, one of the great dishes of the world is paella.
Oh, yeah.
When you go to Spain and you cook a paella in the classic way you should be cooking it, it's in a paella pan, it's over live fire. You start with the rice, you cook the rice, and you start adding the things, and And usually paella has lots of different things in it.
Mhm.
And what I find often is that sometimes not everything is cooked properly because some things are undercooked, some things are overcooked, but also you want the rice to be the right texture as well and and get the sauerkraut on the bottom. And it's really hard to do all those things, okay? So what I tell people, especially at home, is to cook things separately and bring it together.
Yeah.
And I have the same process with fried chicken. Frying a chicken with the bone in and the skin on and getting the chicken perfectly cooked inside and perfectly crispy and the right color golden brown that you want is almost impossible to do it right every time. But if you save yourself some disaster moments by actually baking the chicken so that it cooks about 3/4 of the way, let it cool, give it some flavor, and then give it that coating that you want for the fried chicken, then all you have to really worry about,
Skin.
right, is getting it crispy. And when it's crispy, you know it's done.
I love that sentiment. And you also make the choice to use boneless skin-on breasts and thighs, which I think getting that boneless skin-on breast is impossible in most grocery stores.
No, I know.
You need to ask for it, which is like, I love that cut. But
Just take the skin off.
they always take the skin off because of that. The 90s,
Yeah.
they're like, don't eat skin. I
Right.
mean, come on, guys, like eat the skin.
Yeah.
We don't want skin. I love the charred lime element. I love the sauce. I think
There's also some red chilies in there as well.
there's red chilies in there as
it's
well.
like it's got like this kind of it definitely has like a little bit of it's like a little bit of like Southwestern influence to it, a little bit of Asian influence to it. It's got tons of flavor.
Zooming out, Bobby, I mean, you, it seems, have a high metabolism for writing recipes. Given your TV work, the Beat Bobby Flay series, the Iron Chef series, this book, I mean, how do you write your recipes? I feel like you're probably in your phone a lot writing recipes.
I'm really bad at writing recipes, and that's why I have Emily Timberlake. I mean, basically, the way that I operate as a cook and a cookbook author is I come up with dishes, I cook the dishes. Usually they're dishes that I've cooked many, many times, and then I put them in basically unprofessional order on a piece of paper, usually a yellow pad with lines on it and a pencil, and I basically chart what I'm doing. A lot of times I never write down what I'm doing. That's a typical chef issue.
Completely.
Um,
I've written cookbooks with chefs. It's maddening.
No, exactly.
It's maddening to work with you guys.
But then, then you have professionals like Emily, and she puts it into form.
Yeah, but let's go back about inspiration. Maybe it's not the actual fine point recipe that ends up in a book, but you clearly are thinking about
Always.
food and flavors because you've got this high metabolism. You've got all these activities. So, Bobby, how are you noting it down, and how are you thinking about the world when you're walking around about food? How does that work?
I can tell you one thing. If I'm in your restaurant, I'm thinking about what you're cooking.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most positive way. I am not a hater. I always root for people. I always want things to be delicious when I go to people's restaurants. And so if I'm in your restaurant, I'm hopefully enjoying a delicious meal, but I'm also thinking about what you're doing because there's things on that menu, could be anywhere.
Yeah.
That I haven't thought of, and it might really interest me. But travel's really important to me. I love traveling, and when no matter where I travel, I mean, I'm sure you're the same way. When I book a flight, I'm thinking about like where I'm eating and where I'm staying because that's going to basically be my entertainment first and foremost.
No, I'm the same way, and I think many of our listeners are as well. I mean, I'm on the Delta flight, and I'm like on Wi-Fi, like with the Google Maps. I mean, that's always
absolutely.
What's the last great trip you took for food?
I just took my team. They're sitting behind you. We went to Rome and Bologna.
Oh, nice.
And
Tonda all day in Rome?
And also, we went to Riccioli.
Yeah.
And I think Bologna has some of the best food in the world.
Agree hard.
I mean,
Emilia-Romagna is the best.
It's just so stunning. It's so good.
For Roman pizza, I was just there a few weeks ago. Did you have any good pies that you remember?
I like I Marmi. Do you know that place?
I didn't go there, but I know the name.
It's fantastic. It's a really fun place.
Yeah.
Da Buffetto is also fun.
Totally.
It's like €8 for a pie. It's like so good, thin and crispy Roman style. I like Roman style pizza. It's very good.
Me too. I mean, I covet Midwestern tavern, like from Chicago and Michigan, but I think Roman is probably my close second. Just because that's
what's the place in New York that serves that kind of pizza?
Oh, the tavern style? I mean, we've got like...
what's the place in the Village? Well, Emmett's. It's packed.
Yeah, Emmett's is packed, and that's a good style.
That's a Midwestern pizza.
Yeah, that's definitely Midwestern style, yeah.
Yeah.
You write about your Beat Bobby Flay record. You're about 70% wins, which is like pretty good for...
somewhere between 65 and 70%.
That's like the perfect number for TV because you tune in 1 out of 3 times you're going to beat Bobby Flay.
I don't do it for TV. Let me tell you something. 2 things. Everybody always says, "Is it do I let people win? Is it fixed?" It's not. I can promise you that. You can ask anybody in the building. I mean, if it was, you would know because people like to talk, right? All the judges know exactly what they're doing. Nobody tells them what to do. They taste the food before they even come out. They taste it in a tasting tent, and they have to decide before they see who cooked anything. That's the way it works there. Most people don't know that. I'm giving you like an exclusive.
Bobby, I've known you for 30 minutes, and you don't give sandbagging energy. You don't give an energy that you're going to like let someone win. I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, no chef wants me to let them win. None. Sure. There's not a single chef worth their salt that wants that. They want to beat me fair and square, and when they do, I'm happy for them.
What gives you the biggest trouble then when you're actually going full speed with these chefs?
Well, like... I'm not a pastry chef, so it's a good way to really put me on my heels for sure.
There's a great story about your mom, Dorothy Flay, hanging out at your restaurant in Atlantic City, and really how she became almost like a second chef, a character there sitting.
Second chef.
Okay.
She was like my mom. Like my mom's gone now, but she spent in her sort of later retired life, she lived in the Jersey Shore, and I had a restaurant for 16 years at the Borgata called Bobby Flay Steak, and she liked. She liked the slot machines. I'll just tell you. I mean, that was her,
chocolate martinis too, right?
She liked chocolate martinis and slot machines. That's where she would hang out with her friends, like every other weekend or so. And she would go to my bar in the restaurant and like have a martini, and people would walk over to her and be like, "You're Bobby Flay's mother? Can you sign his cookbook for me?" And she'd be like signing my cookbooks at the bar. I mean, my mother was my greatest cheerleader. I mean, she was the best.
Yeah, and that moment with her, enjoying your success and just being part of your community must have been really gratifying.
Very much so.
Okay, a Philadelphia-style strip steak with provolone cheese sauce. I mean, bold move. You're like rethinking the Philly cheesesteak, but you're doing it as a strip steak, which I think is really original. I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah.
What made you take this on?
I mean, I'm a Philly cheesesteak lover, like most people. But so basically, again, like I took my trips to Philadelphia as inspiration, and I was like, okay. I have a high-end steakhouse in Atlantic City, not too far from Philadelphia. We get a big Philadelphia crowd. If I created a steak that was like a high-end steak, an expensive, dry-aged, beautiful piece of prime beef, and gave them the flavors that they want, that cheese sauce with provolone and maybe some mushrooms, maybe some onions, like they might be into it. It was so popular. I could never make a cheesesteak as good as the guys in Philadelphia. So don't try. Take their inspiration and do something different. And that's what that is.
On This Is Taste, we ask guests about their certain taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready, man?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't even understand what you were saying, but I'm ready.
Okay. The best fruit.
Mangoes.
The worst vegetable.
Beets.
The best dessert.
Tiramisu.
Favorite city outside America to visit for food.
Bologna.
Favorite cookbook of all time?
Zuni Cafe.
Your favorite recent cookbook discovery?
Brooke Williamson has a great new book out. It's her first book.
Your favorite sandwich?
It might be Philly cheesesteak or meatball parmigiano.
Do you have a spot in New York that you go for that?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I used to work at a place called Mimi's Pizzeria on 84th Street, but, it was a long time ago.
I love that. Bobby Flay, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
My pleasure.
Eliza, we're back with 3 things. What is your first thing?
My first thing is that it's persimmon season right now. Are you a fan of persimmon?
Well, yes, I am. I've had the real pleasure of visiting Korea in the fall many times, and it is persimmon season there. And yes, I have had persimmons off the tree and it is amazing. So yes.
So I have been trying to like persimmon my entire life, and only last year I finally came around to it. And specifically, I realized that I like the squishy, juicy persimmon that kind of are jelly-like, and you can kind of nudge them out of their peel and like onto your yogurt for breakfast. And this weekend, I was at the Fort Greene Farmers Market, and as I was walking home on the side streets, I saw a guy selling persimmon just on the street out of a box. And of course, I had to go up to him and find out more. And it turns out that he is a guy who kind of procures difficult to find fruit for restaurants here in New York. He does pawpaw, kiwi berry, things like that. And he had a varietal of persimmon I've never had before, which is called the Rosayanka persimmon. And it's a hybrid between a Russian and an American kind of persimmon. And it just had this really delicious caramelly flavor and pudding-like texture. And it made me very excited to just be eating more persimmon this fall and to seek out this guy again.
I love. So was he selling this like kind of on the side? Was he officially part of it?
Not associated with the market.
Oh my gosh.
It was on the side. There's actually been a lot of niche neighborhood drama surrounding the Fort Greene Farmers Market as of late, because on one of the side streets on Willoughby, where they do a lot of people started doing like closet sales or homemade soap, things like that. And then the police department issued all these warnings saying that you couldn't be selling there. So I don't want to say exactly where this guy was because I don't want to blow up his spot too much. Yeah. But a lot of people have been discouraged, but this guy was there last week selling persimmon, and I hope I can find him again because it was a very delicious persimmon that I've never really seen before.
Wow.
It's kind of smaller than is it the Hayashi is the other?
Hayashi, exactly. Yeah.
It's smaller than that and kind of uglier is the only way I can say it, but really great flavor.
I always think of persimmons having like that tomato texture, right, off the tree, and like I've never been the biggest fan. So I agree with you. I haven't had the smaller version. I think they're beautiful to look at. I think it's never really connected with the flavor profile.
I don't like the fuyu that stay hard. I think to me that has more of a pronounced like tomato apple flavor, but the ones that get squishy are just incredible, I think.
Nice choice. I wonder if this guy's on Instagram. He must be.
I don't know. He seems like he's kind of getting his business up and running still is the vibe that I got. But I recommended a book to him, The Book of Difficult Fruit.
Yes.
So we'll see if maybe we become friends.
You've got a buddy. Yeah.
I'm working on it,
Maybe you'll be on the podcast one day.
Yeah. What's your first thing?
My first thing is I was in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and I went to this restaurant that Sonia Chopra had recommended to me, longtime food writer and from Atlanta. And I think it is a highly, highly rec on my list. It's called Breaker Breaker. It's in the Beltline neighborhood. And it's cool. It's basically a window service place where you order, get your number, sit down. It's kind of in this like open space where there's like a running path nearby, and it's very open, and I mean the vibes are great. It was like fall in Atlanta, great weather. But I think the food really stood out to me, and I loved the smoked fish dip. They do a vegan calamari with hearts of palm, which I thought was a really nice play and creative idea. Grilled oysters. So like definitely when you're in Atlanta, you can get some Gulf oysters, the extra big ones, which are perfect for the grill. And really, I thought that there was great salads there, NA beers, lots of other beers. And I just thought this was such a place if you're looking for a more casual option in Atlanta. Atlanta has got great food, as we know, and we've documented. This was a real new favorite to me, and I will be returning. I love Breaker Breaker. What's your next one?
My next thing is that it's finally cold here in New York, and so I went to do hot pot with some friends, and we went to 99 Favorite Taste on Grand Street in Manhattan, which is one of my go-to hot pot places. And it was just such a fun group meal. It was for like a couple of friends, including myself. We all have birthdays around the same time, and they do free on your birthday with a 3-day grace period. And so we had 3 people in our group of 12 that all happened to benefit from that, which I think is totally kosher to do as long as you have enough other people in the group that are, of course, like paying for their fair share. But it was just so much fun. I think the most popular broth that in the group was the kimchi broth that they do, but I just did the traditional like herbal medicine broth that has a lot of like ginger and dried jujubes and some other herbs like that. It's almost like a bitter sweet broth. And then of course you order all of your things that you're going to dip into your hot pot, like the meat and the mushrooms and rice cakes, and then make your little sauce. But I just thought it was a really fun kind of group activity to do now that it's getting colder here.
I love the eat free on your birthday idea. It's always like a great gimmick. And of course, tip graciously and generously when you're eating for free. And it all works out for everybody. And how fun to have a group around hot pot. That is like absolute like deep winter New York vibe right there.
Yeah, it was really fun. And in all of the photos from the night, it's just our faces are completely obscured by steam. So that's how you know that it was the right meal, I think.
I love it.
What's your next thing?
My next thing is a brand new book from Camilla Marcus. I like this book for many ways. First, Camilla Marcus is somebody who I've been following for years in New York. You know, she launched a restaurant called Westbourne. Did you ever go to Westbourne?
Yeah, I went to Westbourne quite often because it was a like West LA all-day cafe school of restaurant, which really, speaks to how I grew up. And so it was kind of like one of those places that I knew I could get like a really delicious, wholesome, vegetable-focused meal.
Definitely. And I have to give Camilla a lot of credit. You know, it is 2018 when she's launching this place, or even before that. And well before this style of dining really took over New York. And I thought that just a great style of service. But really, a big part of this restaurant was that it was really in that zero waste ethic. And she was really behind zero waste and continues to be a champion for this type of dining and I would say philosophy that I feel, with a lot of other world news and a lot of other noisy things happening in restaurants is maybe less focused on. And I give her a lot of credit for continuing to talk about zero waste. And an extension of this ethic is My Regenerative Kitchen, which I think is a really cool book, and it was new to me, and it was sent, and I had a great time picking through it, and really she is cooking a lot of the foods of her home, and there's a lot of home style recipes, but she really comes at it in the front of the book with kind of her thesis statement, and a big part is food accounts for a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions, and how we should be cooking with food waste or upcycling food. And she has an upcycled squash rigatoni bolognese, which is great. It's mostly plant-based recipes. I think I saw some Parmesan rinds and everything. So I think there's like areas of dairy in it, but it's mostly a plant-based recipe book. She has vegetable scrap fritters and a really cool celery salad with chili oil, lime, garlic, honey, and fried garlic. And it's clear once reading through the recipes, this is like a super talented chef. And I love the book is like really great in the hand. And I like it a lot. And I hope to have her on the podcast at some point. It's a really great book.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of her cooking. So I like the sound of this book. I'll have to check it out.
What is your last thing?
My last thing is that I've been making a lot of beans at home this fall.
Beans.
And I was talking to a friend about what I put in my beans, and I feel like maybe not enough people are keeping like good things to put in their beans at home, because to me, like I don't have to plan at all to make beans. I have them in my pantry, and I know that I have just different flavor boosters around. I don't know if you have any like things you like to put in your beans.
My beans, I typically put a lot of lemon in my beans. So I put like full lemons and char lemons. I always put a lot of alliums as well. So I'll do like either a whole head of garlic and cut it widthwise, and I'll do a big char basically and try to char up all of those flavors and get a little of that Maillard reaction happening, and then fish out the skins and fish out all that. So I always go with the lemonier bean. That's my strategy.
Yeah, I like that. And I think putting the char on it really gives that depth of flavor, which is really smart. So that's something that I do too. I also like doing a lot of dried mushrooms and also kombu in the beans. I think the kombu is something I picked up from Joe Yonen's book, Cool Beans. And he says that often kombu is added in the hopes that it will help like soften the beans more, which I kind of rarely soak my beans just because I'm not thinking ahead in that kind of way. If I think about it, I will, because it's a nice step. Yeah. But the kombu I think helps with that a little bit. Parm rinds in the freezer I think help. Yeah. And then this weekend, I added guajillo chilies that I had on hand as well. And it just made this really nice kind of smoky base flavor to the beans. And then when I made soup with the beans later, I just kind of kept all that starchy bean liquid and then added chicken stock. And that was the base for my soup. And it was, not to brag, but it was a really good soup. It was a really good soup.
It was really good, not to brag. I mean, I know it was a good soup. That pot liquor too, that liquid you get from the beans, making that into a stock is such a great idea, and like you could freeze it for later use. I always am challenged with beans because I'm like always thinking, is this my meal? Is this my full meal? And I often I want to balance my diet a little bit more. And please let me know, what is your take on that? Because I always am torn on that idea of beans as being a main course.
I mean, I think it depends on how hungry you are,
Yeah.
probably. I think if I'm eating beans as my meal, then it's a brothy bowl of beans. I have a thick piece of toast that I'm dipping in that. Maybe I have sauteed greens that are also in there, or a dollop of yogurt or something else. This time, I started with the beans and then I made a soup out of that. And now I just have some extra beans in my fridge, ones that didn't make it into the soup. And I'll just add those quesadillas or to salads or pasta or something like that. But I think that a meal really depends on the person that's eating it.
Totally, well said. And I think it's a good point to have the beans for later use is good. I guess my other trepidation is that sometimes I feel like I'm wasting beans if I make a big pot and I'm not using them all. But yes, you should put them in the fridge.
You
and
can
use
freeze
them.
them also. If you are making a lot of beans, especially if you're keeping them in the liquid, I find that they freeze really well. I kind of, when I don't know what I'm going to cook, and I just want to have something on hand for the week, I find that starting with making a pot of beans just makes me feel a lot more secure that I have a couple different jumping off points.
I love that. I'm going to get back on the train. I think for some reason I stepped off of it. And Joe's book is so good. I love that book. I have it at home in my stack near my kitchen. It's one of my go-tos there back in my bean era. I don't know. I'm getting back on it. And Grancho Gordo, I just need to hit him up and order some beans.
Yeah, I'm not a member of the bean club. I just kind of procure different bags of beans from the grocery store wherever I am. I think certainly the heirloom varietals of beans feel more special, like a big lima bean or gigante. But just making cranberry beans, which is what I did on Sunday, or something cannellini, it's all good.
Have you ever done have you ever mashed beans and made refried beans?
Yeah, I make refried beans all the time.
Me too.
It's one of my big comfort foods. I'll do a bacony refried bean.
Yeah.
It's quite good. Sometimes I'll try to do them more vegetarian for somebody.
I'll throw a ton of cilantro, like more than you think you need. I do that. Christian Reynoso has a great recipe on taste that I use often when I'm doing this. And it's something really satisfying about just mashing your own beans, putting a lot of onion in there, and making your own version of, the Taco Bell bean burrito. I know you're California, you're wincing when I say that. Is one of my meters for the.
Look, I did not wince. I think Taco Bell has a time and a place.
Thank you. You're so respectful.
And you know what? It's all good. It's all good beans.
On the note of fast food, I'm going to say this is not a 3 thing. This is actually the anti-3 thing. Is I tried the chicken Big Mac that seemed to have a little moment on social. Were you aware of this?
No.
Thank you. I'm glad you didn't. That's why you're great. And
I just don't have TikTok, so I feel like sometimes I miss things if they don't make it over to Instagram. It wasn't good.
It was not good. For whatever reason, the cutlets are not the standard McChicken cutlets. They're a version of the pounded out. They're trying to mimic the patty width of the Big Mac patty. So dry, so flavorless, and also FYI, the fucking Big Mac sauce is not good. It's not a good thing. It doesn't really make things better for me. That's my take.
So if this is your anti-third thing, what is your real third thing?
I have a real final third thing, and thank you for keeping me on the posy train because I'm using a lot of trains today. But I got to talk to David Gelb, the creator of Chef's Table. So I was crushing episodes just in prep for that conversation. It's a really terrific conversation that's coming up on the show. And I checked out a couple of the episodes from the newest thematic series, and he's doing noodles.
Ooh.
It's really cool. He has 4 episodes. Guai Rong Wei runs restaurants in London and is from the Xi'an region of China, which is in the north, and she cooks predominantly with wheat noodles and, some of those Muslim flavors, lots of cumin. And really, I love that introduction because I'd never had heard of that restaurant in London. Pepe Guida is a guy who is cooking off the coast of Salerno and doing dry pastas. And it's kind of this, we've been introduced to the pasta pope. That's what he calls himself, the pasta. And I asked David, how does a guy become the pasta pope? And he's well, he's just the pope. So that
they don't get a bunch of pasta makers together in a room and debate and then send up a plume of smoke.
A plume of ragu smoke that comes up after you've cooked your ragu. Yeah, I guess he's the pope. And Night Yoon is also featured. I've not been to Nyumbai in San Francisco, and this is a chef that has gotten lots of acclaim. There's a second restaurant, Lunette Cambodia, which is an all-day Cambodian cafe. And I'm like, this person rules. I really want to get to know Night Yoon and really. Have you been?
I haven't been. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I remember when I worked at Bon Appetit, we covered the opening, and one of the cool things I remember is just the music that's playing in the restaurant, and it's kind of an ode to Cambodian rock and roll in the 60s, and that's on the walls and also over the speakers.
I once saw a play called Cambodian Rock Band. That's kind of the whole scene is that era, and it's a great play. And I would love to go to this restaurant. I've like heard of it, but I've just SF. I got to get out there. Last one is the Funk Master. Evan Funke gets his Chef's Table episode, and come on the show, please, Evan. We got to get you. We got to get your story.
Yeah, I think I haven't really watched a lot of the newer Chef's Table, but when I do sit down and watch one, there is just so much like joy in watching someone who's so good at what they do and getting to share that in that kind of way. So this sounds like a really good lineup.
It's a great lineup there. And there's a slate of new episodes that are debuting over Thanksgiving. And I'm not sure if they're public, but we talk about it in the episode. And really, really amazing series to remind everyone. It is the longest running series on Netflix. Like in all of Netflix is Chef's Table.
Wow. That's really crazy. And it's smart. I guess they know the family is going to be together and they're looking for something to watch. And so Chef's Table is going to be the
Put on
unifier.
some Chef's Table. Yeah, it's great. Well, thanks for sharing your 3 things.
Yeah, you too.
This is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.